Good evening from the Qtv Newsroom. I am Maria Masani and thanks for joining us. First, the main local, international and sports news headlines. President Barrow's month-long tour of the nation ends in Banjul with the announcement of a significant engineering scholarship. In an exclusive interview with QTV, a Gambian U.S. citizen recently elected to the Wisconsin state legislature tells what his plans are and gives his comments on recent political events in America. We hear about a forum organized by the Catholic Development Office in partnership with the International Republican Institute on Citizenship, Human Rights, Democracy and Rule of Law. In international news, Senegal announces an outbreak of the highly pandemic bird flu. In sports news, we hear why fans of a German fifth-tier team want to hang on to their title as the Bundesliga's worst ever club. And African football's governing body announces candidates for its presidency and other roles and excludes the current president from the list. Those were our main headlines. Now the local news in detail. Stay with us. After a month crisscrossing the length and breadth of the country, the president wrapped up his late 2020 to early 2021 constitutionally mandated dialogue with the people tour in Banjul. On Friday night, as Alusisa reports, the meeting culminated the launch of National Engineering Scholarship Scheme and Youth Revolving Loan Initiative.
The country-wide tour sought to gather first-hand information of the needs and aspirations of the people and to assess the impact of government's policies and programs on their lives. During the tour, the president presided over 44 public meetings during which Gambians informed him of their major concerns, including roads, water and electricity. They were reassured by the president that their concerns are noted and that government is committed to improving the welfare of the people. At the final meeting in Banjul, the people of the capital city appealed for a social security and housing finance corporation housing estate as rent rates are very high, which they said has forced many to leave the city. While welcoming the expansion of the Banjul seaport, they had reservations about it taking up parts of the residential area, especially Havdai. As such, they recommend the expansion to be done on the ocean side of the port. Banjulians are in need of a multi-purpose sports center, a standard car park and a town hall. According to them, the current library in Banjul is dilapidated and they want a modern library. While assuring the president of their support and calling on Gambians to support the president, they were appreciative of the major Banjul rehabilitation project which is transforming the city. Addressing the meeting, President Barrow said the tour has helped him to see and experience the daily struggles of Gambians, particularly the country's very bad roads. President Barrow was full of praise for Gambian women for their hard work and commitment to national development. He expressed disappointment at the dark Banjul streets en route to the meeting ground as he promised that the street lights in Banjul will be fixed to light up the city streets.
Capital la dafa wara leer nañ President Barrow bugul lendem leer la buga.
He said the ongoing major projects in Banjul are just the beginning, with many more to follow for the city. At the meeting, a National Engineering Scholarship Scheme for Grade 12 graduates was launched by the Ministry of Works and Higher Education. The scheme seeks to empower graduates interested in pursuing engineering courses. These initial 10 students were presented with their scholarship award letters, air tickets, and stipends as they prepare to leave the country to pursue different engineering courses at the Maritime Institute of Ghana. The initiative is a joint venture by the Ministries of Higher Education, Works and Transport, Petroleum and Energy, Gambia Civil Aviation Authority, NAWEC, GIA, the Gambia Maritime Administration, and the Personnel Management Office. Ministers Bailamin Diop and Badra Diouf are hoping the students will return to serve their country as they recognize the importance of engineering, science, and technology. They say most students will benefit. Similarly, the first disbursement of checks worth over $2 million were presented to several youth under the newly created Youth Revolving Loan Scheme to empower young people in diverse businesses. Youth Minister Bakari Baji said more youth will receive support in the coming weeks and months. Also, women groups in Banjul were also handed checks under the Women Enterprise Fund to support their venture. President Barrow welcomed the launch of the Youth Revolving Loan Scheme and the National Engineering Scholarship Scheme. Reporting for QTV News, I am Alusisa.
In an exclusive interview with QTV's Mohammed Lamin Choi, Gambian U.S. citizen recently elected to the Wisconsin State Legislature, has committed to contributing towards reform on immigration, criminal justice system, access to Medicaid, and economic growth for his district. The newly elected legislator described recent events following the U.S. election as a disgrace to the USA and a disappointment to the world. Here is the exclusive interview.
It is called the realization of the American dream by many, which recent U.S. election history has shown and proven America's diversified and inclusive political spectrum, especially after the election of its first black president. This time around, a Gambian who over 20 years ago migrated to the U.S. to pursue his dreams has been elected to the Wisconsin State Assembly after garnering 80% of the votes cast. Samba Balde has become the first Muslim elected to the Assembly and the second black lawmaker to represent Dane County, District 48 of the state of Wisconsin.
My motivation obviously came about, if there's any in terms of politics, about 2014, 2015, when, if you remember, the relationship between people of color and law enforcement in the United States was not at its best. The economy was tanking. There were so many issues, particularly in our communities of color. Being an activist then, I realized that there are so many things that are systemic. And so the best way really, in my opinion then, was to not be just an advocate, but find a way to really be somebody who really actually make these laws and determine how people's lives should be.
After previously serving between 2018 to 2019 as president of the Madison Common Council, the legislative branch of the government of the city of Madison in Wisconsin, he threw his hat into the political ring for higher position in government where his reform agenda can flourish. At the Wisconsin State Assembly, Balde hopes to deliver on his campaign promise of access to Medicaid, economic growth and reforms on immigration and criminal justice system for the nearly 8 million population of the state of Wisconsin.
Rent is becoming expensive. Home ownership is not good for communities of color. So that is something that I am also interested to pursue. The other thing is criminal justice reform. As you may know, there's a lot of issues, between communities of color and law enforcement. And so it is important for me that trust is rebuilt, but also that, the prison system is reformed to an extent where marijuana is legal in many states in the United States. So therefore, in my opinion, nobody should go to jail just for smoking pot or things of that nature.
The Democratic lawmaker is among the millions of American citizens and the world who are shocked at the dramatic scenes of events that continue to emerge from the president and his support base, with conspiracy claims of voter fraud and refusal to concede defeat to President-elect Joe Biden.
America, for over, basically 400 years ago, has relied on their system for peaceful transfer of power. And so what happened, on Wednesday was a disgrace, not only to the United States, but to the rest of the world. I would say to the rest of the world is more of a disappointment also. Growing up in Gambia, the reason I end up in the United States, I had always looked up to this country.
However, after dozens of failed legal battles to overturn the election results, it was a time for Congress to certify Joe Biden's victory on Wednesday. Until the 11th hour, what many are now calling an act of carnage, coup, riot, insurrection, marking a shameful chapter in U.S. history, was sparked by Trump and his supporters against their own representatives. The United States, a country that claims to be a global leader in democracy, has its president casting doubts on its democratic system in the final days of his tenure.
The reason I end up in the United States, I had always looked up to this country as a model country, as a country where you can go and have refuge in terms of political freedom, but opportunity to realize your fullest potential. And so to see thugs, criminals storm our state capital is unacceptable, or in DC is just totally, completely wrong. And to see that activity being incited or spearheaded, obviously, by the sitting president of the United States, even make it much more gross than it would have been.
Trump has been blamed for inciting the riot, that has claimed the lives of 5 people and left dozens injured amidst a loose security presence, followed by the unleashing of the National Guard about 2 hours later for a cleanup operation. For many, this was too little, too late, and shattered the illusion of equal protection for everyone. Many commentators saying it will have been a bloodbath for black people to storm the Capitol or black men chasing a white law enforcement officer in Washington. But for the white rioters, it was a day to take over Capitol Hill and show the world that in Trump's America, white is right.
Possibility is that, he was also behind the delay. And so being the commander-in-chief, it would be very easy for him to delay the process and make sure that people are not responding, not picking up their phone so they can give orders as was being asked for. So that is what may have happened. Already people are resigning. But again, the beauty of this country is that they will investigate this and get to the bottom of things.
The response from the Democratic Party has been to draft and invoke the article of impeachment next week, in less than 2 weeks before Donald Trump leaves the White House. For Trump's Republican Party, many seem too scared of his popularity among members to offer much in the way of criticism. For some, the attempt to impeach is unnecessary. But for the Democrats, it is a significantly urgent move to pursue to the finishing line.
We think Donald Trump should be out there is because he's a very dangerous and unstable person. And so if you are dangerous and unstable and you have command of the most powerful military in the whole world, you have access to doing things that can change the world upside down basically within seconds. Every minute's count. And so 12 days, 10 days, 1 week, however long we have now against the 28th. It's a very, very long time for somebody like Donald Trump who is not stable, who is basically sick in the head. And so, yes, for me, it is important that we find a way to get rid of him as soon as possible.
President Donald Trump will be leaving office on January 20th, leaving behind a more divided America as his legacy for Joe Biden to inherit. But with the most diverse cabinet in the White House and policies to reform the current system, there is hope to create a better America for all. Mahmoud Lamin Choi, Qtv News.
The Catholic Development Office, in partnership with the International Republican Institute, on Friday organized a forum on citizenship, human rights, democracy, and rule of law. The event also saw a presentation of bicycles and hand wash stations to various schools across the country. Bab Garcia reports.
Youths, women, traditional and local authorities attended the event at the Caritas office at Westfield. At the opening ceremony, Francis Mendy, the executive director of CADO, highlights the need for the forum.
Following a conflict and development analysis that was conducted in this country in 2018 and 2019, there are certain findings that indicate that we are experiencing a lot of tension. Politically, you have inter-party tensions or conflicts. You have intra-party, within the party itself, you have problems. Okay? We have ethnic-related tensions. We have land disputes everywhere. And it has become the biggest challenge we face as a nation in transition. Okay? We have religious tensions between religious sects. These are all issues we need to talk about. And of course, we have the issue of youth unemployment. We have the issue of migration. All right? And with the advent of COVID-19,
275 bicycles donated by Rotary Ireland were presented to 13 schools across 4 regions of the country. Hand wash stations to prevent the spread of COVID-19, donated by a club in Villingen in Germany, were also presented to schools. Francis Mendy explains the mobility challenges students face and the impact the bicycles will have on their education.
Impoverished students across the country lack transportation, which causes them to walk long distances to receive an education. And in many instances, quite a good lot of these students arrive to school late. Boys and girls with the means to travel to and from school in convenience have a great incentive to improve grades at school. This initiative, in partnership with Rotary Ireland, has already provided 1,440 bicycles to Gambian students across the country. With this resource they need, students can thrive in their education and also contribute to other important causes, like reducing waste and saving the environment.
Andrew Jassy is the representative of the Catholic Education Secretariat.
From the experience, I was once a principal and I was one of the beneficiaries. I had students who were coming from the Casamas and some students were coming from about 4 kilometers away. But with the bicycles, they were able to arrive on time, and we also witnessed significant rise in good results. So definitely the bicycles are very, very handy to our students, and I hope this gesture continues.
St. Vincent de Paul's Basic Cycle School in Brikama is among the beneficiaries. Samuel Kaijaju is the principal.
It's indeed a great gesture because it eases movement of students who are coming from more remote areas. Students find it very difficult to reach schools when they are coming from a far place, and they find it very inconvenient when they reach school late. And they are also tired to attend to session. So with these bicycles that they are going to use to ease their movement to and fro from the school, I think it is also a very wonderful gesture. And I say on behalf of all the schools, the students, the admin of all these schools, a big thank you to CADO.
In total, 1,715 bicycles have been presented to schools across the country in recent years. It is hoped the bicycles will provide a good incentives to encourage students to get to school on time, especially those that live several kilometers away from their schools. Babakar Sise, QTV News.
We will take a short break, and still to come we have international and sports news. Welcome back. Senegal has announced an outbreak of the highly pathogenic H5N1 bird flu on a poultry farm in the Thiès region, east of the capital Dakar. Mumrumboj has been finding out what this means.
The outbreak killed 58,000 birds in the 100,000-strong flock, with the remaining birds culled, according to reports citing Senegal's veterinary services. The disease was detected on December 23, 2020 by the manager of a private farm in Thiès, about 70 kilometers from Dakar. The Senegalese authorities began the culling on January 2nd, slaughtering 40,000 birds on the day. The farm has now been quarantined and placed under security surveillance. An investigation is underway to try to determine the source of the contamination, officials say. But so far, the disease has not yet been declared in any other place, and the samples taken from farm workers at the farm were negative. Until this outbreak, the country had been spared the bird flu because in 2005, Senegal banned poultry imports as a preventive measure against the disease. According to health experts, humans can occasionally contract H5N1 avian influenza, but transmission from an infected person to another is difficult. Where, however, people do become infected, the mortality rate is about 60%, according to the WHO. And infection in people is mostly associated with contact with infected live or dead birds or H5N1 infected environments. So far, there is no evidence that the disease can be spread to people through properly prepared and thoroughly cooked food. The Senegalese Poultry Producers Association says the sector generated about $280 million in 2018. This latest outbreak, coming amid a COVID-19 pandemic ravaging lives and economies, could not have come at a worse time. President Macky Sall calls it a grave hour on national television. The country, or at least its two biggest regions, Dakar and Thiès, appear to have been gripped by a second wave of COVID-19 infections, the two regions accounting for about 90% of the infections. On December 26, new cases rose by a record 240. And on December 29th, 7 deaths were reported, the second highest count yet. In January, the government reimposed emergency measures, including a nighttime curfew in the two regions to stem the spread. But no sooner had it done that than protests erupted in Dakar against the curfew. The country has now topped 20,000 COVID-19 infections and more than 430 COVID-19 related deaths since the pandemic began. And the extent of the bird flu in the country remains to be determined. For QTV News, I am Mamadou Mbouch.
In sports news, fans of a 5th-tier German football club are celebrating their team's record as the Bundesliga's worst ever team. Going into Saturday's matches, the record looked under threat. Adi Darami watched Saturday's crucial match.
Unbelievably, for 54 years, fans of Tasmania Berlin, a club now languishing in the 5th tier of German football, have been strangely proud of their team's record, which appeared under serious threat recently. For more than half a century, the club held the record as the worst team to ever play in German football's top division. However, the recent poor form of Schalke put that record under serious threat. If Schalke had failed to beat Hoffenheim this Saturday, they would have equalled the Bundesliga's longest ever winless run of 31 games, a record that Tasmania Berlin have held since 1966. The last time Schalke had that winning feeling was almost a year ago when they beat Borussia Mönchengladbach 2-0. Since then, it has been a tale of woe. On Saturday, Tasmania Berlin fans were able to breathe a sigh of relief as Schalke turned on the style to dispatch Hoffenheim 4-0. In what was a surprisingly open game, they took the lead just before halftime and then scored 3 goals in the second half to put the contest beyond doubt. Tasmania Berlin were briefly the best team in Berlin in the late 1950s and the early 1960s. But when the Bundesliga was formed in 1963, underhand tactics by Hertha Berlin president allowed that club, which is still in the Bundesliga, to represent Berlin in the Bundesliga's inaugural season, all at Tasmania's expense. When Hertha Berlin were relegated 2 years later, the German Football Federation, the DFB, considered it a good PR exercise for the Bundesliga and for Berlin, the city, which was already divided by then, to have a capital team representing them. The decision to include Tasmania in the Bundesliga for the 1965-66 season was made just 3 weeks before the start of that season, and Tasmania's players were recalled from their vacations, dragged from beaches and campsites across Europe, and urgently recalled to Berlin via a radio announcement. The team then went 31 games without a victory, picking up a series of unwanted records in the process, including the Bundesliga's lowest attendance when just 827 fans turned up for the game against Borussia Mönchengladbach in January 1966. That negative record has shaped the club's modern identity and has become a source of pride for Tasmania, whose fans assembled outside the Olympiastadion last weekend ahead of Schalke's game against, of all teams, Hertha Berlin. Tasmania's fans were willing Schalke to victory to preserve their proud record. Alas, they were not up to it and they duly lost, to be 1 game away from equalling Tasmania's record. Schalke's fall, which brought them close to equalling the record, an unwanted record at that, is remarkable, given that they finished second in the Bundesliga as recently as 2018 and were Champions League semi-finalists as recently as 2011. Had there been any Tasmania fans allowed in for Saturday's match, doubtless they would have celebrated as joyously as the Schalke players who were happy not to equal the record and danced around the pitch when the whistle went to end their 4-0 victory. For QTV News, I am Ade Darami.
The Governance Committee of the Confederation of African Football met in Cairo on 5th and 6th January 2021, convened by its president, Mr. Michael Kizito Brizuobi, to carry out the eligibility checks of candidates for the positions of CAF President and members of CAF Executive Committee. The current CAF President, Ahmed, is not among them.
The current CAF President has been declared ineligible following a 5-year FIFA ban. Despite this, members of his team are hoping that a successful appeal to the Court of Arbitration for Sport, CAS, could change this. Both former Ivory Coast Football Fed President Jacques Anouma and the current Senegal FA President Augustin Senghor have been authorized to contest the March elections in Morocco. Further checks are required before either Mauritania FA President Ahmed Yahya and Patrice Motsepe, the South African who owns Mamelodi Sundowns, can be added to the list of candidates. To quote, "The committee considered that further checks are necessary before a final decision," CAF said this week. To this end, a hearing of these candidates will be organized in Cairo on 28th January. For QTV News, I am Ade Darami.
South Africa's Olympic long jump silver medalist Luvo Mayonga has been provisionally suspended for 3 breaches of anti-doping rules in 12 months.
The 30-year-old South African star, who has battled drug addiction in the past, could be banned for 2 years for what are called whereabouts failures. In May 2020, Mayonga was filed for public drinking and contravening South Africa's strict lockdown restrictions. In 2012, Mayonga was banned from athletics for 18 months after testing positive for crystal meth. Mayonga would have expected to participate in the delayed Tokyo 2020 Olympics, which is scheduled to start on the 23rd of July 2021. The athlete is among the favourites to win gold in Tokyo after winning the 2017 World and the 2018 Commonwealth titles. The drug rules state athletes must provide accurate and up-to-date details about their whereabouts to ensure compliance to anti-doping rules. A whereabouts failure against an athlete will be recorded if they fail to submit their whereabouts by the required deadline or have not provided updated or sufficient details to administrators, or they are not available for testing in an agreed 60-minute time slot. Under World Athletics anti-doping rules, any combination of those 3 whereabouts failures within 12 months counts as a violation. Mayonga was charged by the AIU in 23rd of December last year, and if he accepts the ruling, the AIU would issue the maximum sanction of a 2-year ban. If he decides to appeal against the punishment, the case would be heard by an independent tribunal before a final decision is made. For QTV News, I am Ade Darami.
Before we end this bulletin, let's take a quick look at our main stories. President Barrow's month-long tour of the nation ends in Banjul with the announcement of a significant engineering scholarship. In an exclusive interview with QTV, a Gambian U.S. citizen recently elected to the Wisconsin state legislature tells what his plans are and gives his comments on recent political events in America. We hear about a forum organized by the Catholic Development Office in partnership with International Republican Institute of Citizenship, Human Rights, Democracy, and Rule of Law. In international news, Senegal announces an outbreak of the highly pandemic bird flu. In sports news, we hear why fans of a German 5th-tier team want to hang on to their title as the Bundesliga's worst ever club. And African football's governing body announces candidates for its presidency and other roles and excludes the current president from the list. That's all we have for you in this edition of the QTV News. Do enjoy the rest of our programs. Have a pleasant evening. Bye-bye.